I'll try to, if you're not, like, if I'm moving too far back there and you can't see me, please just throw something at work. Good evening, everybody. My name is Roy Petitfils. I am a Cajun from South Louisiana, so I'm cold. Just put that right out there. My name is Petitfils. As Kim mentioned, I've worked with young people for the last 20-something years in a variety of settings. For the last 8 years, I've been working with primarily teens and their families as a psychotherapist in South Louisiana. I'm deeply privileged that I get to travel around and speaking to adults about teens, and a number of occasions I get to actually share my journey and share my story and my message with teens themselves, which is a real privilege. Unfortunately, when most people look at my name, they don't say Petitfils, they say this.
Yeah.
Which is a bit unfortunate. They say this, which is unfortunate when you do what I do for a living. So let me get this straight. You're bringing me to see a pedophile. So it means, ironically, it means little boy in French, whereas my family jokes, one who eats the whole cake, which is a tradition in my family. You get to eat the whole cake on your birthday. It still is a tradition in my family. I'm really not sure why there's one candle there, because it's clearly not one. Speaking of family, these are the folks who are so important to me. The most important thing you can know about me are these three folks right here. My wife, Mindy, and we're still very, 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 I say best friends, you know, at the risk of alienating the guys. Whenever I say that we're still best friends, guys, girls are just like, oh, and the guys are like, we've only been married 15 years, so maybe that'll change. Our oldest, Max, is perfect, and 4 years after we had Max, Ben came along. And, so we all here have kids, right? So I've only got 2 boys. Max is 11 now, Ben is 7. You know, but when Max came out, right, and I was a counselor, and I've just been, this whole nurture versus nature thing has always fascinated me, and it still does. You know, you're familiar with that, right? Are we who we are based on our genetics, or are we more who we are based on, you know, environment? Basically, did God screw us up, or did our parents screw us up, right? So Max comes out, and Max is perfect. Like, he's just an easy baby. He's got a beautiful full head of blonde hair, just like I used to have. And he's just easy baby. And Mindy and I, like 20 minutes after she delivers Max, we're just both. We did this. 20 minutes of perfect parenting, and then 4 years later, Ben comes along, and 20 minutes later, we're like, you, God, you did this. About 6 months after Ben was born, I'm giving him the bottle, and so we're sitting in our recliner. Now, both of the boys get their genetics, physical genetics from Dad. They're large and in charge, and so I'd give them the baby bottle, right? I'm sure like I look at the one baby bottle, and they'd be like, they'd laugh at it. They would suck this bottle so hard that it would whistle. It would literally whistle. And they would just like, and at 6 months, both of them, they would just be like, they'd drain the bottle and just like, toss it up against the wall. So I'd line them up like shots on the side of the recliner. So one evening, I'm sitting in my recliner watching one of the many reality TV shows that's out of Louisiana, for which I'm sorry. Or you're welcome, wherever you fall on that. So I'm rocking, and I'm giving Ben the bottle, and he's jamming on it. So I'm out, I just keep rocking, and I don't have a shirt on. Exactly. And all of a sudden, I feel this. Shook up. Ow! And look, I look down, and look, he's got it. I mean, he's got it. Like, my brothers, écoutez-moi, as we say in South Louisiana, French. Listen to me. Whenever you hear women use the word latch to describe this process right here, trust me when I tell you, understatement. Pick both, much more accurate. And so I'm trying to get him off, and I'm pressing. He's like, he is not coming off, and I'm gonna snap his clavicle if I push down any harder on this kid. And I'm screaming, Mindy! And she's not coming, and I'm just screaming, and I'm hopping out of the recliner, and I'm still trying to get him off. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna swing him off if he won't come off. And so I'm just like, whoa. He grabs the other one right here, grabs me back here, and he's like, and I'm screaming, Mindy, get in here! And finally she comes into the living room and sees this sight going down, and she's like, oh my God, let me go get my phone. I'll be right back. I want to record this. True story. So those are my boys, both special, both unique, as are your kids and the kids that you work with. They're all special, they're all unique. I've never met two who are alike. And so as we sit here tonight, what, 50 some odd of us, I'm sure we've got at least 50, maybe more stories of the challenges and the blessings that teens bring. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Awesome. So before, I always just like to take a little bit of a survey, and what I am going to assume, since you don't want to talk about your own kids, what advice, what help might your friend need with their teen? And so just to kind of, because I'm not here tonight to give a talk or give the TED Talk. I'm here tonight to speak to you and to help you. And if I can't be helpful to you, then it's just, I'm not here to give my talk. I've given it 1,000 times. I want to help you. So just real quick, I'd like to just do a quick survey. If any of you are willing to risk being vulnerable enough to share, what's tough about parenting or working with teens today? Yes, ma'am.
I don't work with teens today, but I did when my children were teenagers. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Give these people a huge dose of information. Don't waste a second on any lost time. Everybody needs something. They need to walk out with one thought that will help them keep their sanity and...
Amen. Okay, you got it. So don't waste time. I won't. Yeah, so hurry up. Next person. What else? I'm with you. Oh, yeah. I knew I was going to miss you.
They have access to so much on the internet.
Yeah, they do.
That's just very overwhelming.
They do.
For parents and for...
Yeah, teens have access to so much information via the internet, and it's very overwhelming for their parents who want to monitor and help protect them. But it's also overwhelming for the teens, even though they're not, are the young people. But they're not going to admit it necessarily to you, especially their parents, but they tell me how overwhelming it is for them. Yes, ma'am?
I think with how Kim sent the message out was just kind of trying to get inside their head. You know, you talk to them and you're like, how's your day? Good.
Yeah.
How's everything? Great. Anything going on that I need to know about? No, everything's
Nope,
good.
everything's fine.
So it's just kind of maybe some key words or key things
Yeah.
that can start a
For sure.
conversation off the bench. It's good.
Communication, we'll spend some time talking about that. Yeah, and look, we have till 8:30. We'll go till 8:30, and I'm going to try to leave ample room for question and answer, but if you need to go before then, please, you do you. Yes, in the back. Me? I'm doing the best I can. But for the teen, like how to get that message across to them. Take care of your body, you're going to need it for the rest of your life. And we're saying that to an individual whose prefrontal cortex is undeveloped, and that whole the rest of your life thing is something that we need this part of our brain to really connect these future consequences with present actions. And so how do we do that today? Especially teens who what's the word I'm looking at? They're more, their behaviors and their actions are definitely more compartmentalized today more than ever. And they can't see the connection between what they do in this sphere of their life connected to this other sphere running concurrently, much less between what I do in this sphere today and how that might affect me in the same sphere 5 years, 10 years down the road. So yeah, that's a real dynamic, and we'll talk about that. Did I see another hand up maybe? Yes, ma'am. Monitor all the social media. Yeah. Okay, we got our work cut out for us. Please feel free to interject at any point in time. So the title is, what teens want you to know but don't tell you. The question that I get from a lot of adults is, Roy, if teens want us to know this information so badly, then why don't they tell us this information? What is it that happens that keeps them from telling us info? And basically what it is that, young people are, in the words of a mutual friend of Kim's and I's, is Dr. Bob McCarty, young people are experience rich but language poor. We've all got two, and I'm going to make a gross oversimplification, but it helps to make the point, so bear with me. We've got this expressive vocabulary, which is the words I'm using right now, and I'm pulling them out of the ether to communicate information to you, which is like, say, X, right? Use my wife's a math teacher, so that's X. We've got a receptive vocabulary, which are the words, cues, and meanings that we can perceive and we understand the meaning of, that is X to a factor of 100. Does that make sense? So what we can say and what we can communicate, this is a highly abstract skill that was impossible, that was very challenging for all of us when we were a teenager, because the parts of our brain that we need in order to do this effectively, which we'll get to the whole how was your day thing in a second, that's an incredibly abstract question, especially to a modern teenager. And so we're asking them to tap into this very small, limited set of their expressive vocabulary, but understand that their receptive vocabulary is much bigger. So teens are very experience rich, but language poor. The other thing that happens for adults is what we call the projection bias. And some of you, I'm going to assume that a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about, but I'm just going to keep going. Projection bias happens in a bunch of different ways, but with young people and teens, especially with teenagers, is that we falsely project onto teens a capacity for self-understanding, self-awareness, and self-expression that we have, but they do not. So we project onto them. So so we should probably, all the wives in here, or at least if you've dated a guy before, guys, I'm going to roll us under the bus here just for a little while. We'll roll moms under the bus later. Trust me, we'll get there. But it's like, so just kind of think of the teens as your husband. How was your day? What are you going to get? Fine. Right? I mean, they're going to go, fine, good, whatever. Yeah, I don't want to talk about work or whatever. Teens, they just don't really want to talk about their day. And so we project onto them, whereas you might ask your girlfriend, how was your day? And go, pull up a chair, sister. Maybe let's light a scented candle, But it's like when we look at our teen, we don't see a teenager, we see Oprah. We see the Dalai Lama, Pope Francis, Dr. Phil, Sigmund Freud, all rolled up into one person. And for many moms, it's like when they go, well, how was your day? And they're saying this, I was a 12-year-old boy. My mom used to ask me this all the time, baby, how was your day? And I remember, I'm 43. I was like, fine. But my mom, this is what, in her dream, this is what she wanted to hear. No, Mom! It's always about me. But today that stops. It's not about me. How was your day? It's always Roy, but it's never Connie. How was Connie's day? In fact, can we go sit down? Can we snuggle, hold hands, interlock knees, maybe light a scented candle? And look, Mom, I just don't want to hear about what's going on at the surface. I want to hear about the deep currents of your day. Like, this is mom crap, right? This is what you wouldn't give to hear. But you're going to get fine. You're going to get okay. And so the problem there is that we're asking the wrong question. Let me tell you how your teen's day was. It's been going on for years. It hasn't stopped. And it's going to continue going on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It goes on while they're awake, which is often too long. And it continues to go on, beep, buzz, and interrupt while they're sleeping, which is often too short. Their day never stops. What we're generally asking about is, well, how was school? How was your school day? Well, that was an 8 to 12-hour blitz, socially, academically, where they've got to impress hundreds of people, no less than 5 to 15 different adults. They've got to manage the expectations of those adults. They're fighting these competing needs that every adolescent has ever had still does have and will have these competing needs to stand out and to fit in at the same time. And next time you interact with your teen, just be mindful of that, that this teenager has two competing, we all have, by the way. It's accentuated in adolescence. I need to be my own person, but I need to be accepted by all of these people at the exact same time. That creates a boatload of stress. So their day is this incredible, if you've ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire, not that I'm recommending it, so when he's having a conversation with Cuba Gooding Jr., my day is an up at dawn, late at night, pride-swallowing siege, the likes of which you will never fully imagine. That's what their day's like. And so to describe it to you in the car ride on the way home or when they get home is asking them to do something that most adults would have a difficult time doing. Here's the better question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how was your day? Here's what you're going to hear. Every single time. If you get something other than that, email me, bigbaldSpeaker@gmail.com, and let me know. But most of the time, you're going to hear 5. On your scale of 1 to 10, how was your day? Oh, it was a 5. But what have you done at that point? You've taken it out of the abstract ether, and you've made it very, very concrete. How was your day? Well, I got to school, I felt some flutterings in my tummy, but I didn't know if it was separation anxiety, and then I got to math class, and I saw the way the teacher was looking at me, and I was just like, why do I have this need to be a people pleaser? Was Dad a people pleaser? Is this something from my environment that shaped how I am? It's like, all this other stuff. How was your day on a scale of 1 to 10? It was a 5. And you're like, okay, well, so that's good. At least that's different from fine or okay. Here's where you take that. What would have made it a 9? Well, if I'd have passed math. Well, now you've got 100% more information than you did when you had fine. Amen?
Amen.
All right, so now you can get 200%. Well, why wasn't it a 2? Well, when I asked Jenny to homecoming and she said yes, that made it pretty good. Well, wow. You can stick with those two things. Now, here's the risk. How many of you do you think that would be helpful? Could you see yourself actually going out and doing that tonight? Right? Okay. So here's the danger. Teens are very savvy. You do that for 3 days in a row on day number 4, what's going to happen? You're going to have one finger hold out in your direction, right? And it's going to be in the form of a facial expression. They're going to read right now. That's your new thing. Do it like once a week. With younger teens, and how many of you guys here have kids who aren't teens? Yeah, who are younger. If your day were a color, what would it be? I ask my boys this all the time. Max is about to be 12. If it was an animal, what would it be? It gives them something very constructive. So what's the goal at the end of the day for the parent? What are you trying to do? When you ask your kid how their day was, what are you trying to do with that? Let's talk about it. Just no answers wrong. Just check in. What's the goal of checking in? I want to make sure they're okay. Yes, that is it. Yeah. What else? In the back. Who? I want to let them know that I care about them. I want to let them know that I care about them. Anything else?
You're interested.
I'm interested. Let them know that I care about them. Let them know that I'm interested. I want to make sure they're okay. A big goal, and I was expecting one of you moms to, not that I'm gender-oriented necessarily, but I was expecting a mom to say this, was guys want it too, we just don't speak in this way. A big goal for parents is I want to connect, right? We want to connect. And that is a deficit in our culture today. When I used to work with couples before I realized I was just cost prohibitive. It's 8 times more work and you can't even charge twice as much, but I stopped doing it. It's like walking in, handing 2 people a sledgehammer, they beat the hell out of each other, and then they turned it on me. And so it's crazy. And they would say, we have communication issues, but it really wasn't about the communication, it was about connection. What they really wanted to do was connect. What they really wanted, no one says this, is intimacy. I want to know you and I want you to know me. And I want to feel like we're connected. Because when we're connected, and we sustain the connection, and that's what I want to help you with tonight, this relationship can survive a multitude of problems that are unsolvable in the typical way we talk about. So can you solve the social media problem? Absolutely not. Everything is easy to solve on the extreme. right? And the reason you're here tonight is because on some level, you've either tried the extreme or you know that this really doesn't work over the long haul, that it's not in your family's best interest or your best interest. I can't turn a blind eye to the social media, nor can we pack up everybody and move to some island on Fiji, because we wouldn't have social media, but we'd then kill each other before we got to cannibalism, right? We couldn't go that route either, so we've got to live here in the middle. So if it's not solvable, what can we have? We can have a connection. We can have levels and layers of trust, and so that's what we want to. Is it fair? Keep everybody following? You with me? Make sense? Any questions so far? All right, so how do we do that? One is to make the questions more abstract. Another tip in terms of the communication, because I know this is what everyone's asking before people start getting up and leaving, you can at least get this before you head out, is when's the best time of day to talk to a teenager? 10 o'clock? 10, 11? With the two answers. One is whenever the teen wants to talk, which is usually 10 o'clock at night. Which is, for me, I'll let you know, that's an hour after I go to bed. And you can tell that my kid's 12, right? I'm going to still want to go to bed at 9, even though I won't be able to once he gets older and is more involved in activities. So that's when they want to talk. They've had about 5 or 6 hours to process their day unconsciously, and now their resistance is starting to lower, especially if you're going into their room, and if you're a safe place to talk with them, that's the best time of day. That's the best time of day to talk to most kids, is right before they go to bed. But we're exhausted. That's the most inefficient time for most parents to be able to talk with their kids, is right before they go to bed, but it is. Another tip, how many of you have boys? Again, these gender differences are melting by the day, and this is true for a lot of girls. But very often, well, you're not seeing much of the Oval Office these days, but you know, in the spring you're going to see more shots of the Oval Office. Typically, notice that if you look into shots in the Oval Office, the two chairs where they typically have two heads of state sitting, which are generally men. These guys are visiting, but those chairs aren't directly facing one another. And when I have a guy, whether it's a teen in my office or a dad in my office, I will never face them directly like this. I will always make sure that my body is turned slightly to the side. These nonverbals, for those of you who don't believe in it, you're going to think that this is very stupid and meaningless. It sounds very subtle, but it's incredibly powerful. If it wasn't one of the secrets of to make a living for me, I wouldn't believe in it either. If I didn't trust me, I wouldn't do it, because it's just a lot easier to sit there and like, let's get to it. But this is way too exposed for most guys. And so to turn slightly to the side, you know, where I'm not directly facing them, I can be a little more guarded physically, which means I will lower my guard emotionally and verbally and talk to you more if I'm protected. You know, and I see my wife when she sits down with the boys. She holds their hand. Ooh, back off. You're suffocating me getting that close to them. And you know, Max, even though Max is much more like her, you know, I can see him starting to pull away. People are like, guys don't have deep conversations. Absolutely we do. Except we're not eye-locking into each other. That's why we go and belly up to the bar. We can look at the bartender, or we can be looking and facing the same direction and having a deep conversation and not gazing deeply and longingly into each other's eyes. The other secret for guys is in addition to just not, my secret weapon with guys in my office is a dartboard. I will get those teen boys in my office and they will tell me everything while I'm whipping their ass at darts. And I am shaming them because I play 5 or 6 times a day. I mean, I've got a messed up right hand. You know, and they're trying to be, so they're so focused on beating me, but even that's, and they're not thinking, and so I'm asking them, and so they're talking. But the other thing that happens is that the female brain, and ladies, you know this, works much better than the male brain does on some level. The male brain goes into what's called neural rest states far more frequently than the female brain does. Meaning that in the average course of a day, the brain is going to want to preserve energy, and so it's going to go into a neural rest state. It's going to fall asleep for a little while when it's not being engaged. The female brain doesn't do it because it doesn't need to be kept awake by the body like the male brain does. So for boys, when their bodies are moving, their brains are working a lot better. So sitting down, which is why the educational system has failed millennia of boys, because it was designed, primarily the one we have here in our country, for the most part, by Catholic nuns who stood in front of the class and they taught the way they learned best, which was sitting in a desk taking notes, and that's not the way boys learn best. It's just not convenient to educate boys the way boys learn best, which is playing outside, moving their bodies, being engaged, manipulating things kinesthetically. So take your boy for a walk, whether that's your son or your husband. Go for a walk, go for a bike ride, and do like this, and you will be able to have. Does that make sense? Can you see yourself doing it? Now again, is it predictable? Absolutely. So you want to have as many tricks in there as you can. Make sense? Okay. So that's part of communication. So the reason they're not telling you, one, is because you're their parent, and two is because they just don't, the things that I'm going to share with you tonight, they just don't have the language for it. So who are young people today? I'm going to move real quickly through this. 5 to 10%, I'm going to say closer to the 10% range, are identifying somewhere in the LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, is what the Q now stands for. Sorry for the outdated slide. But aren't talking about it. More and more teens today, if you're talking with them, and if you're open to wanting to know, you'll know and understand from them their tolerance of gender fluidity. And it's not just sexual orientation fluidity, it's gender fluidity, right? Meaning, I'm not sure whether I'm a guy, girl, I'm not sure where I fall on the masculine, feminine spectrum. And so for teens having incredibly high tolerance for that being fluid, and so that's where the cue for questioning comes in. I really just don't know. Same goes with sexual orientation, and if you've probably listened, you've heard all of the different terms like pansexual, asexual. Pansexual meaning that I'm panoramic, right? I just can be sexually attracted to anyone or anything. Asexual, I'm gender neutral, I don't like claiming a gender, and so more and more of them are not necessarily identifying as that, but they're identifying with that, instead of being labeled. While at the same time feeling pressure from one another to identify too quickly. Are you lesbian, gay, bisexual? Are you straight or not? And I had a teen with me, and I remember a few months ago, when she was just like, I just don't want to be pressured into that, I don't know. And I want permission to be able to question, which my parents won't give me. And I want permission to be able to question and not have it locked in, which my friends won't give me. Can you imagine the anxiety that made for that teen? And for a lot of them, for a lot of teens, the issue of gender, that just wasn't even on the table when I was their age. It just really wasn't on the table as an option, like to pick from the buffet of life. Oh, I get to well, am I a girl? Am I a girl? And so, while I think that, well, not I think, I know that teens who have issues of gender or gender identity is very real. I think that there are also a lot of teens who are going, oh, this is an option. Well, I don't know. Let me give that some thought. So they're questioning, and for a lot of parents that can be really stressful. And so one of the things that I always encourage parents to do is keep them at the table. Too often, out of fear, when we parent out of fear, and it's hard not to parent out of fear, amen? Because we're scared, and there's a lot of scary things out there. But too often, when we parent out of fear, and aren't aware that we're parenting out of fear, we close off the conversation. And so we can't even have, they're not even talking to us about things that we want them talking about. As a parent, I can tell you, I want my boys talking to me as much as possible. And it's not that I won't have an opinion, it's not that I'm not going to be honest with them, but how I express my opinion will come long after I know fully well how they feel and where they are with whatever their issues are. And for most kids, they know where you stand. They know, most teens that I work with know their parents better than their parents know their parents. They know where their parents stand, they know what their parents think. So this is a big issue for a lot of folks. 1 in 4 teens, we talked about a little bit. 1 in 4 teens cut, carve, burn on themselves in order to feel better. Mind blowing, right? Teens spend 9+ hours a day on the screens. That's probably low. The average family will spend 8 hours a week in FaceTime, even though the research is showing that more families are eating dinner together or sharing one meal a week together more than they were in years past. Screen addiction, which is producing emotional neglect for a lot of teens. We're going, and I've seen it in my house. We'll all be on our own little screen, even though the boys don't have screens. My wife and I have enough of them for them to be able to share. And you walk in and everyone's on their own screen, and we're like, we're together, but we're not together. Right? And what we know is this: wherever you fall, whether this is comfortable for you or uncomfortable for you, this is anxiety relieving. It's one of the reasons that we're never going to be able to live stream Mass. We can do it, it's just not going to work. I mean, we can do it, and if you're sick, absolutely, or you can't make it or whatever, we can live stream it. We can have the Catholic Mass, video course you take every Sunday. You could even pay for it. But there's a reason that we've got to come here and sit in the pews next to people we like and next to people we don't like. People who smell, who are like us and who are unlike us. And at a certain point in the Mass, shake their hand and say, peace be with you. And there's just something about this interpersonal interaction, though, despite how badly you may not want to go. And I don't know about you, but there are many Sundays I don't want to go. Like, I can just imagine. Can you imagine being somebody who speaks professionally, anticipating the crapshoot homily every week? Right? And I know how much effort I put into preparing for my talks. And to know he just maybe winged it over coffee this morning, I'm like, oh God. And so my pastor, we have a great relationship because I'm as you can tell, I'm just pretty blunt and honest. He goes, how was the homily? Well, I thought it sucked, to be honest. And one time we had this conversation, he's like, well, what part of it you didn't like? It was homily number 6. The first 5 homilies, Father, were great, but once you got to number 6, and it was just like land the plane. And so he gives me permission, just start doing this in the back of the church when it's time. And so I look forward. But no matter how much I don't look forward to going, you're like, this guy's a heretic, he's going to hell. And you may be right. In several different religions. Whenever I walk out of the doors, I'm glad that I went. And I wouldn't get that were I just watching it. I need to be around people. The same thing's happening in our homes. And for a lot of folks, I think they just don't know a way out of it. We're in this lifestyle, we're in a pattern, and we've got habits in the way we live our lives. And I say we, not you, I say we. Have patterns in the way that we live our lives. We're working all day. We give 90% of our best energy away at work all day, or on whatever it is we do during the day. And we've got 10% reserves available for the most important time of the day, which is when our kids get it. We know it, and they know it, but no one's talking about it. And we don't know a way out of it. And we're hoping upon hope that maybe on the weekends, but the weekends are so crowded with a whole bunch of activities that we never used to be involved in. And so we're not really connecting on the weekends either. And we're hoping that maybe that wonderful vacation that we've been working so hard all year long, maybe on vacation we'll be able to connect. And we get on vacation, and we actually have time to connect. And we connect. Because it's everywhere, and then we still don't connect. And teen parents are like, but Roy, my teen does not want to connect like this. And I'm here to tell you, you are correct. But if we're honest, you don't either. Right? If we're honest, we don't either. And it's not that I'm Roy, I don't get on my phone because I don't want to connect with my teen. No, I'll get on my phone because I want to constantly check Facebook. And when I've been doing that for 2 hours to see how many likes on my Instagram or how many people shared my TED Talk or whatever it is, the hell it is I'm doing on this thing, my kids are sitting there doing their own thing wondering, well, clearly that's more important than me. Well, Roy, if I put this down, they're not going to talk to me either. Well, maybe not. But they're definitely not going to interrupt this to talk about the things that matter. So our friend Mike Patan shared this with me a while back that I just find it's gold. He said, you know, when he was raising his teenager, he just made it a point to be somewhere in the house and sit, not doing anything. He would just sit at the table and, you know, he drinks tea or have a cup of coffee. Please make sure he gets this video. He goes, I just have a cup of tea, and I'd sit there for like an hour. And there was a time when Megan was in the house, and he'd say, you know, she would come up to me and we'd have a talk because I was available. She didn't have to interrupt me. I was just there available. Now, let me tell you how my male-driven, successful brain thinks about that. Do you know how much crap I could be getting done? In that 60 minutes, I could write 2 blog articles. I could share stuff on Facebook. I mean, I could clear my email inbox. Like, that's a wasted hour. Or if you've got, I've got other kids. My youngest is going to be clamoring for my attention, so that might not be doable. But there could be some time where we could just waste time where our teens know, hey, I can get at you now. We're busy, and our lives are. The screen addiction is one of the things that's producing, and if you walk out of here with nothing else tonight, please understand that while this is not being widely talked about enough, that our young people today, and adults, but especially our young people, are living in the midst of an anxiety epidemic. Anxiety disorders are the #1 most diagnosed mental disorder in America today, especially among young people. They are still the most widely diagnosed and commonly diagnosed mental disorder, even though now we have pulled compulsive behaviors like hair pulling and other compulsive type behaviors out of the anxiety disorders. We've also pulled things like OCD, which is very similar. Many people who suffer with OCD is compensating for anxiety. I like stuff neat in the refrigerator because when I look at it, it makes me feel good. It gives me a dopamine hit in my brain. And that's just it's one of the least common types of OCD that we're seeing today. Much more insidious are the young people who have severe OCD, who are going under the radar because they're having mental OCD. They have these obsessive, complex thought mazes that they get themselves into that they cannot get out of. And they will lie in bed at night, awake, unable to sleep, because their brain is churning these obsessive thoughts, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder. It's churning these obsessive thoughts. They cannot sleep, but because they're not compulsively hand washing, skipping cracks, checking the locks, and lining their crayons up like they're supposed to, we don't know that they've got OCD and that they're quietly suffering. And it's a very, very common. And a lot of that's being driven by anxiety. And so, Roy, what's causing it? What's causing the anxiety? You know, and so I'm not here to be popular. And I know that I'm going to pee in some cornflakes by saying this. But, you know, one is that we've got too much exposure to the media. We've got too much exposure to the media. And I sense that we're in a very sophisticated audience here, and so we're all very culturally sophisticated. And I see parents who believe that it's important that their 10-year-olds sit down and watch these 2 imbeciles who are running for president have what's called a debate, which is not a debate. It's emotional and intellectual violence. That's what it is. And we're lining up like spectators at a gladiator match. And we're lining up and we're sitting, giving them a front row seat to watch this bloodshed. And they're walking away from it with post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's not a hurricane or a tornado, we're not calling it that. The number of young people who are walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder today is mind-boggling because of what they're being exposed to on the media, and that's just one aspect of it. Now let's go to the gaming. We take the number of, and I know it's primarily boys, but an increased number of girls who are gaming too, maybe quietly and secretly. But these boys that are gaming for hours and hours at a time when they get home, you know what these games are doing to their physiology? There's a wonderful book. I'm going to recommend a couple, and I'm going to offer you my book. Please buy it. I could use the money. But there's a wonderful book that I'm reading that I strongly recommend. It's only been out for a few months now, called Glow Kids. How screens are rewiring the child brain and the teenage brain. It's fascinating stuff. And so they're playing these games, and they aren't violent games, but they're competitive because they're a game. And so it kicks them into fight-flight mode. And so for the male, once we get into fight-flight mode, we will tend to stay in it for 3 to 5 hours. We will tend to stay in it for 3 to 5 hours, and so that revs up, the adrenaline revs up, and so we're in this, and so we're constantly in this heightened state, and it's affecting the brain. And so a lot of these kids we're seeing who have legitimate symptoms of PTSD. So Roy, what do we do? Well, there's no easy answer. But social media, as big of a concern as it is for me, because it's being talked about, it's the least of my concerns as someone who goes around lecturing and talking to folks. The bigger concerns to me are just the amount of media that they're exposed to, period. The amount of time that they're spending on screens, period. Whether it's television, whether it's Netflix, whether it's video gaming, whether it's social media, and how the light from the screen and how whatever activity on the screen is affecting their brains, and how it's increasing their anxiety. Watching the news, even I don't know too many teens who watch the news. A lot of parents will have it playing in the background. Well, they're hearing it. They're hearing it and they're picking up on it. They're watching things like 9/11. They're seeing these things on the internet. And look, don't be for a second think that I don't think that this is happening in classrooms. I heard of a teacher the other day who thought it was important to show the 5th grade class the footage from 9/11. I was like, are you kidding me? Why do they need to see that? What do you think that did to a 10-year-old brain when he saw those planes crash into the Twin Towers? I mean, what meaning? These are just things we've got to rethink. Well, Roy, do we really have to rethink it? My question is, are the way that we're doing things right now, is that working? I don't think it's working. The statistics would show that it's not working out in the best interest of our teens. And I see a lot of parents who are going, well, I'm a bad parent. I don't think, I've met very few ill-intentioned parents. What I have met are a lot of folks, myself included. I read about this stuff for 2 hours a day because I just can't stay on top of it any other way, who just don't have the information to know that my son gaming for 7 hours a day on Saturday is literally rewiring his brain. For every hour that he's gaming, after about 1 to 2 hours, his chance of success in life is dropping. And so when we know that information, when we pull the plug on it or we put limits on it, when they come back to us and start dropping F-bombs on us, right? Before, I don't know that I could do that. Well, when I know how it's affecting them, then I might be able to do it because I realize that, I'd rather have you upset with me than the alternative. Am I making any sense here? You guys following me? Okay, all right, good. So that's part of it. Anxiety, and kids today are just too busy. I'm going to say it. This will get me crucified across the country. It's good that it probably only will be speaking a couple more years because I'll get run off. They're just too damn busy. We're too busy. We're just too busy. My wife and I are talking about it all the time. There was a study published last week that I read. The average child, wait for it, the average child has 12 hours a week less free time than they did 10 years ago. The average child has 12 hours a week less free time than they did 10 years ago. And what do we do in free time? We rest. We relate to one another. And when we're in a relationship, when we're connected with one another, what happens? Our anxiety goes down. Anxiety doesn't go up because I'm connected. It's not my connection in my relationships that are making me more anxious. It's the absence of the connection in my relationships that are making me more anxious. I'm not staying awake at night worried about being connected in my relationships. It's worrying about being disconnected. And connection takes time. There's no efficient way to stay connected in relationships. It just takes time. And they are busy. They're exhausted. They are stressed. When I visit with them, they're just so stressed. And they will claim to want all these activities. They will claim to want, and they want it. And I know, but so many teens I see today who are trying to make grades and are competing, doing extracurriculars, trying to get in to a small subset of colleges that almost nobody can get into, and they're killing themselves in order to do it, to prepare themselves in that college for a career that may or may not exist. You know, so many people in my class, I remember they were studying to be doctors. Oh, I'm going to be a doctor, and that's going to work out well. A couple of years ago, I asked them, how's that working out for you? And it was working a hell of a lot better than it was for counselors. Let me put that out there, right? But it wasn't working the way that they thought it was going to work when they were in med school. The nature of work, and so Roy, should we not prepare our kids to do anything? Well, no, but when they come to us and say, I really don't know what I want to do for a living, we can meet that with compassion, understanding that the world of work is changing more rapidly today than it ever has in the history of civilization. And their classmates are making 6 figures a year because they've got Purina, who's advertising on their blog that they're doing on their backyard goats. And they're going, seriously? You need me to go to Harvard for that? I can make more money than you by starting a blog. And we're like, no, you can't. And they're like, you're crazy. Yes, I can, because I know 5 people who are doing it. And so, what do we do with that? One, I think we understand it. And I think the other piece is that sometimes we don't give teens enough credence and listening to them and understanding that not everything they say that sounds so far-fetched is as far-fetched as we might think it is. Some of it is, because they're teens and they don't know the world the way we know it. But you know what? A lot of teens know more about the world in some ways than we do. All right. So I'm going to move through the 8% screen addiction, anxiety, epidemic for sure, passive emotional neglect as well. They're more transparent. This is a good conversation, I think, for every parent to have with their teen. 1 in 4 teens send nude photos and have I'd say 1 in 3 probably have sext or send sexually explicit text messages to one another. And I've heard teens say this, well, Mr. Roy, I'm just being honest. About what? Did he ask you specifics about your body that necessitated you to send your picture? No, but I'm just being honest. If I'm going to be honest with him, then he needs to know all about me. Well, that's not honesty, that's transparency. There's a critical difference. I see this in marriages a lot, where we feel like we've got to tell each other everything. Oh, I'm just being honest. No, honesty is, what do they have a right to know? What are they asking to know? And did they ask it of me, and then I'm going to share that. Transparency is, I'm just going to pull back the veil. Like, we go to the beach every once in a while, my wife and I, every other year, so we'll go down to Destin, and we're walking down the beach, and, you know, there's this Greek Adonis who's walking down the beach, and he's got hair, and I want to shoot him, because he's got gel in it. And he's got like a 13-pack or whatever, and he's rocking it, and he's walking, and my wife, you know, I can see she's looking at him. I know. And I know she's like thinking, God, he's hot. Right? I know that. I don't need her to say it. She can think it, but I don't need her. That's the difference between honesty and transparency. Now, babe, do you think he's hot? Now, that's an honesty question. Follow me? And she'll go, yeah. So, transparency. Parenting myths. Yeah. And this is preaching to the choir tonight. I feel so bad in presentations like this because the folks who are here are generally the ones who need to be here the least. Asking for help as a parent means that I'm a failure. We're very judgmental towards other parents. We are as parents. If we're honest, we all are. I know I am. And it makes it very difficult for us to be able to ask one another for help. But it's one of the greatest, it's not people like me. It's not books even. It's one another. It's, hey, going to parents who share your values. And maybe not all of your values, right? Because we get picky, right? We like to perch ourselves up. Well, you know, they've got 4 of our 5 values, but they aren't 3. Therefore, we're better than Moses or something, right? You know, and I know no one here does it, but in South Louisiana we do that all the time. And so, but to go to folks who have like-minded values and say, hey, we're struggling with this, what do you guys think about it? Right? We used to live in the, it's always taken a village to raise teens, and it always will. The problem is we don't live in the village anymore. And so our challenge is that we've got to be intentional about recreating the village, which generally means we've got to go to other people in the village and say, hey, how do you handle this? We've got to seek out people who have both successfully and unsuccessfully, in our judgmental minds, raised teenagers and said, how did you handle it when your kid did this? I know that this issue wasn't around when you were raising teens, but what questions would you have asked when you were raising your teen about this? Now that you've done it, how do you think you would have handled it? But what does that take? Time. It takes time and it takes vulnerability. It takes vulnerability, and when we ask for help, it's a very vulnerable thing. And it's not just guys who have a hard time asking for help. We all have a hard time asking for help. No one has it all together, people. It's this myth, and psychologists, we call it the false attribution error. And no two places on the planet where the false attribution error says this: we falsely attribute to people who look good, smell good, sound good, people who have their names on books, who are big, bald, Cajun, funny, articulate from South Louisiana, who are up in front of the church, people who get on a plane, because that means something. Like, let me tell you, there's nothing sexy about flying coach when you're 6'2", 240. There's nothing sexy about that. There's no expertness about that. You don't feel like an expert when you're sitting next to someone and they smell. You just don't. Right? But we falsely attribute to them levels of intelligence. Who giving TED Talks? Well, that did it. Oh shit! Now he's giving a TED Talk. Now we've got to listen. Right? And it is what it is, right? I'm not minimizing, but you can give a TEDx talk. I mean, you could. I mean, it's not like it's for the the chosen few. There are things you should do to do it, but but we falsely attribute to them qualities of intelligence and holiness and happiness that they probably don't have. Two places where this runs rampant: Facebook, Instagram. I'm going to loop them together. Mark Zuckerberg runs them both, and Snapchat, but we don't do that, right? You do, but they don't. Right? And the other place is here in church. We walk into church and we see that tent because they've got their Sunday best on, right? And we look around and they just drove up in the bus, all 15 of them in the one family, right? And they've got all 15 of their heads in descending order and the sticker on the back of the bus. And we're like, oh, and the bus is named Humane Vitae. And they get there and we're like, oh, the Jones, they're really Catholic. They've got it together. The Jones were just arbitrating a goldfish war in the bus. F-bombs were being dropped in the bus, right? They're dog cussing each other on the way in, and as soon as the guy in the collar shows up, they're like, oh, hi, Father! And the kids are like, what are you doing, you crazy man and woman? What are you just, Father, you know what they just called me? We all throw our crap in the closet when people come over and sweep it under the bed. No one has it all together, but we walk around and feel like, oh, they've got it all together. No one's got it all together. No one's got it all together. 2 weeks before I gave this keynote to youth ministers across the country in San Antonio. It was like this big deal, right? Opening keynote for this national convention. And I'm getting ready for this keynote, and I'd seen too many clients this day, and I'm exhausted. Now, I live to eat, right? I live to eat, and my wife eats in order that her body can function. I really don't understand that. And so I'm always thinking about the next meal, and that's generally how most Cajuns are. My wife is a notable exception. So it's 7 o'clock, I'm just getting home, know that my wife hasn't even thought about supper. So I go into the store, got some gourmet food, cheap hot dogs and chili. Sorry, I'm saying this in hot dog country, but it's a true story, and that's what I got, with cans of cornmeal chili. And so I get home, and they're all on their screens, and I get home in my passive-aggressive way. I take the cans of chili and hold them up above the stove, and they just go, bam! Which let everyone know that Dad was home, and Dad was pissed. And unconsciously, that's exactly what I wanted to communicate, so I was very successful. And so they all get off their phones, and then they look, and I know better than to have this conversation with my wife, and my youngest, Ben, you've already heard about him. So I go for Max. He's easy. And I look at him and I go, Max, if I make you hot dogs for supper, are you going to eat them? And he's got the counselor gene, and he goes, can I ask a question first? And I was like, Max, it was a simple question. If I make you hot dogs with chili for supper, are you going to eat the damn things? And he said, Dad, I just, Max, yes or no, son? Are you going to eat them or not? And his eyes start welling up with tears. And his face starts to redden the way a 10-year-old boy would when he's being shamed by his father. And he just starts crying. I just want to ask you a question. And my wife finally gets up and interrupts this nonsense and sends the appropriate one to time out, me. And she gets me in the room and she goes, what are you doing? This isn't who you are. What's going on? I was like, I don't know. And she delivers some truth to me that I needed to hear about how I'm working too much to buy us things that none of us freaking need, and that once we have, we're not going to use, and we're going to eventually throw away, and it's going to fill up a landfill. And that all my activity, all the kids in the world I'm trying to save in my work during the day, that I'm missing out on the two who need me the most. And I got it, right? That was right before, 2 weeks before I got up and stood up. No one has it all together. I don't have it all together. My mom didn't have it all together. You know, my mom had an affair with my dad, who wanted nothing to do with her once he found out she was pregnant for me, because he had another family living in another part of Louisiana. And so my mom, we were poor. She wanted more for me than she could offer me. And so she worked 4 jobs in order to be able to give me a private education so that I could get out of the poverty that I was born into. 34% of parents in America are single parents. 1 in 5 kids in America, and I was one of those 1 in 5, grow up in poverty. And so she's working all these jobs, and at a young age, I turned to food as a way to cope. And my mom kept working with good reason, because she didn't want me to turn out like the rest of my family turned out, thank God. I'm not the rest of my family, but some of my cousins turned out. And she knew that if I went to a public school, that I would turn out just like them. And so she worked 4 jobs. From the time I was 12 years old on, I would go home at night. My mom wouldn't be there when I got home from school, or wouldn't come home till after midnight. I'd cry myself to sleep, and I would eat, and I would eat, and I would eat. One day when I was in the 10th grade, my mom picked me up from school, and she brought me to a local grocery store. And we get there, and there's this butcher who's waiting for us, and he waves us in the back, and I'm like, Mom, what are we doing here? And she said, you'll see, baby. And we get into the back, and we start walking through these cows that are hanging and these pigs that are hanging. And this butcher brings us up to this meat scale. And my mom tells me that my doctor had called her that day and said that he needed an accurate weight on me for his charts. And so she said, so we got to get you a weight now, so why don't we go to the doctor's office? And she said, the doctor's office scale only goes up to 350 pounds. And I'm 16 years old. She goes, you haven't been able to weigh on that in years. And I stood up on this big meat scale, and I watched this long red needle spin to 454. And I saw the tears of shame and embarrassment trickle down my mom's cheeks. And she said, we got to do something about this, Roy. And I said, I know, Mom, we do, but we didn't. We couldn't. Our life, like the lives of most people, was really messy. My mom wasn't working to support her crack habit. Not that I'm judging people who do that. She was working 4 jobs to get me out of poverty, and thank God she succeeded. I would not be standing in front of you today if it were not for her hard work in doing that. And her ability to be able to watch me suffer, knowing I was eating myself to death, but knowing that the alternative was even worse. I don't know that I'd have that much strength as a parent. You know, I was unmercifully bullied. I'd go to school every day, and I was unmercifully bullied. But something happened between my 10th grade year and my 11th grade year. I went from being the object of consistent negative attention, people constantly bullying on me, and look, they picked on me bad. You see, unlike a lot of people who gain weight, I didn't gain my weight here in my stomach. I gained my weight here on my back. And so, like a lot of folks who are overweight, you see them walking around, a lot of guys, they have these big bellies, right? I didn't. My big belly was in my upper back. I looked like a freak. And could you imagine what young teenagers did with that? I walked into school one day and I saw all of my classmates shoving their PE uniforms over the back of one of my classmates' shirts. And then they taped a big red sign to it that said Roy. One of them comes up to me and sticks his hand under the flap of fat in my back, and he's trying to find my ribs, and he goes, "Can you feel that, fat boy?" He goes, "I can't even feel your ribs. Can you feel it?" And I was like, "No, I can't," because I couldn't. But I felt it. I still feel it, even today, even though I've forgiven them. Am forgiving them. I'd love to say forgiveness is a one-time event, but it's not. But even after that incident, I remember the next year things got worse. People stopped picking on me, and believe it or not, it was worse. I'd walk through the halls of my school, and I remember people weren't picking on me. They weren't giving me any attention. They were just ignoring me. And at 17, I remember wanting people to pick on me. I remember trying to get negative attention because the negative attention was better than no attention. And I learned a powerful lesson at 17 that I want to share with you tonight from my experience, and it's been my experience with the teens that I've worked with for the last 20 years. Rejection, contrary to popular opinion, is not our greatest fear. Your kids are not afraid of being rejected by their classmates as much as they're afraid of something. They're not afraid of your rejection as much as our greatest fear is to be invisible. Because when you're invisible, you will seek out rejection because it feels better. And if there's anything, if there's anything as a parent, and I heard you asking this in your questions and you're wondering, is it working? There's no measuring stick for it. But if you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to ask them, how's your day, or ask them nothing, you ask your kid how their day was. And you take fine, because you're right. They will feel like you at least care. Because you know what I hear in my office every day? They come in and are, "Oh, mom and parents." Every day I hear that at least once. "Mr. Petitfils, you are not going to believe mom and parents." And this is what they say. I was like, "Oh." And like I turned the bus engine on. Like, let's back it up. Back it up over mom and dad. Let's roll up. I was like, "Tell me about it." "Oh, blah, blah, blah. They're just constantly nagging me. They're doing this. You just wouldn't believe." I was like, "Oh, I wouldn't. How bad are they? I can't even imagine." They're nagging me. They want to know. They've got a GPS on my phone. They're constantly tracking me. My dad put another one up underneath the car. Like, he's probably got crap in my clothes that don't even have. Oh, those bastards. Oh, they're terrible. Wow. What's that like for you? "Oh, it's terrible. There's nothing worse." Wow, I can't even imagine. I have a question. Wondering, what would it be like if they never talked to you? And instantly they go, "Oh, amazing." I was like, "Oh, it would." I was like, "No, let's get into that moment for a second. Like, let's just picture your parents. You got home, they didn't look at you, you just constantly did your own thing. What would that be like?" Like, "Oh, it'd be great." I was like, "How long would that be great for?" Whew. At least a year. Can you tell this is a verbatim conversation? I'm like, wow. Do you know any of your friends whose parents just don't care? "Oh, yeah, Johnny. Man, his mom and dad, they just never ask him about anything. Wow, man, I bet that's great for him. Johnny must love that." No, he didn't love it. Really? Because just now you just said that would be awesome if mom and dad just never talked to you. And yet that's not Johnny's experience. What's it like for Johnny that his parents never talked to him? Well, he feels that they don't love him. I'll be damned. Really? Wow. So on one end, we got mom and dad who nag you to death and you don't like that. But if they back off, then you feel like they don't love you. Yeah. It's like, boy, what would that be like for you if you were a parent? Knowing that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And you're like, well, that's a good point. Would it be possible just for a second for you, next time your mom and dad are aggravating you, for to feel like that they're really showing you love? Because it's a lot easier to not care. Like, yeah, you're right. And they get it. They don't get it here. They need some help to get it. But trust me when I tell you, you back off. And I would much rather deal with helicopter parenting and overprotective nagging parents with the kid from that family, and that's not necessarily the best, than the one whose parents from neglect. I'd much rather deal with the overprotective issues than the one from the parent from neglect. Much better issues to deal with. Be involved. Be involved in the lives of your kids. You know, I think it's more important for you to be involved in their life than it is for you to involve them in other things in their life. The problem is that it's a lot easier to involve them in things than it is for us to be involved in their life when they're not as busy. Messing about you're in it right, we already covered that. You know, boundaries, one parent, I'll get to a couple of. Let me open it up for questions. Any specific questions? We got 15 minutes left. I got one more thing that I really want to cover, but I want to make sure that I get your questions before I go into it.
You must be doing really good.
I doubt it.
Okay, I have a granddaughter who cuts.
Yep. Yep.
Now, what makes a child do that?
Yeah, well, one is that it's the copycat effect with cutting. Is that we've kind of reached the tipping point with cutting to where teens know about it. I didn't know about it. What I knew about was fried chicken, and I went to fried chicken, and that's what I used to medicate my pain. Now they know about cutting. So here's what happens with cutting, and try to follow me here because the physiology is important, and I'm going to go much more into this tomorrow with the youth ministry. But we've got the anterior cingulate cortex in our brain is where the brain registers pain. I know you're like, oh God, seriously, check this out though. This is pretty fascinating stuff. It's where it registers all pain. It's where it registers emotional pain. And so when I'm hurting, when I feel invisible, when I feel like there's someone at school who I want to see me but they don't see me, when there's something that I want my parents to know about me but they don't know about me, then I have this emotional pain. Anterior cingulate cortex picks up on that. What's interesting is that now what happens is that when I cut myself, the anterior cingulate cortex picks up on that pain too. And so when it picks up on this pain, the physical pain, it starts producing a whole host of involuntary responses to alleviate this pain. And when this pain goes away, this one goes away too. They both roll away on the same track. The problem is that this one comes back. Right? And so that's the feedback loop of cutting. And then it can get into a more addictive cycle, but it's what I know. Now there's a lot of reasons kids, a lot of kids who feel invisible cut. I had a young woman tell me this, you know, I don't know who I am. I feel like no one sees me, and there are times, Mr. P, that I don't even see me. But when I look at my arm, I can see that. This I know is real. Right? Now that's a problem. This is definitely something that as a parent you find out your teen is self-harming, or this is something that they need professional help. And obviously I'm not doing this out of self-interest, but it's certainly something that they need help with, and you need to get them help, whether they want it or not. If you're interested, I've made a couple of videos like, well, how do I do that? I've got videos on my Facebook, how to find the best counselor you can for your teen, where I give you very explicit things that you should do. If you're looking for a therapist for your teen, here's what you need to do. A, B, C, D, all the way through Z. Here's how to get past the gatekeeper at the counselor's office. Here's the questions that you want to ask. Here's what they're going to tell you, and here's what you say once they tell you. So I'll walk you through the process, and it's there. It's very valuable. It's certainly something that if you're in that, you certainly want to go and look at that. So that's with cutting and self-harm. That, though, isn't, you can't do a blood test and find self-harm, right? So that's medicating depression, bipolar disorder, a lot of OCD, a lot of anxiety. Most of the depression I see today is depression that is brought about as a result of anxiety. Anxiety and depression are two sides of the same coin. One usually follows the other. So I'm always wondering, is the depression driving the anxiety, or is the anxiety driving the depression? Most of the time today what I see is anxiety driving the depression.
So she was bullied.
Bullying's a real deal. October's National Bullying. I know bullying intimately well and how bad it is. It's bad. It's bad. So what do we do about it? I'll be honest, especially for boys. I'll tell you. I know this is going. I've been very public about it, so it's going on the website. Where when I was a school counselor, I bring parents in. And I'll tell them, until your son punches this other kid in the face, this will not end. I can get involved in this, and look, I know there are a host of people who would just throw up their arms and write me off, and there are, probably with good reason. But I'm telling you, as somebody who worked in the school system, who was a teacher, or a campus minister, and a school counselor, a lot of the things the schools do directly in order to respond to it, not all of them, but some of them actually make matters worse, and the kids know it. For the love of God, don't tell the teacher, don't go tell the counselor, because then they're going to bring everyone in their office, and everyone's going to lie to them and create this whole ring of BS. And when we get out of there, I'm going to get the kid crap out of me. Please don't do that. And so, but when the bullied kid gets out of the disempowered position and moves into the powered position, now they don't have to, but in boy world, a lot of times, sometimes it does need to get physical. I didn't do it. I kept getting bullied. But when I did, my junior year, when a guy kept picking on me my junior year in high school, and I pushed him back. He came and he used my face as a punching bag. I didn't realize he had a black belt in karate. I wish I'd have chosen a different bully. I went home that day, I was black and blue, and I lost that fight, but I won the war. I won the war. That was my junior year, as my sophomore year. I didn't get bullied. I didn't get picked on anymore like that. Any more questions? I know those were a couple of very specific ones. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a teacher and I teach kids that are struggling with school.
Okay.
So they obviously have that underlying struggle.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
it's still difficult to handle them when they have when they're acting out in negative ways just
Yes.
to get their attention and you know that they're doing it, but
Yeah.
your initial reaction is to, kind of
Correct.
impulsively, I don't know what to say, I don't want to yell at them,
Yeah, absolutely. Been there.
And I'm working on being more patient with them this year, and it's
Yeah.
really kind of hurting more.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still a kid that
You know, as an educator, and I know it's a little different, middle school, but for a high school educator, on some level it's never been harder, but on some level it's never been easier to really dethrone the curriculum. Kids do not need adults in classrooms for data. They can get data in plenty of ways. They need us to give a context to the data, but more so especially those of us who have a ministry mindset, whether you're in a private or public school. My wife's a public school teacher, but you can see that as a ministry, as an opportunity to see teens. And I don't get the curriculum, I don't get it quite done this day, my boss is going to be upset with me, but was I able to be patient with that kid? Did I do a one-on-one with that kid? And how many one-on-ones did I need to do with that kid? Because I became that kid my junior year. People wouldn't see me, I became an obnoxious you-know-what. And I didn't have good social skills at all, and some of you are like, you still don't, and you would be right. But I became this obnoxious kid because I just wanted people to see me, and I know I aggravated, and I got that resistance, and it just drove me further into it. But I do remember a couple of teachers who pulled me aside one-on-one and were like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Now, again, you're dealing with kids who have half a brain in middle school. I understand that. Less than half a brain. I mean, they're losing half of their brain while they're in middle school because of neuropruning, and so they're literally going crazy just by the fact that they're alive. So it's a little more difficult, but one-on-ones can help. One-on-ones can help. Yes, sir.
Why? Do you feel like, if you were talking to the kids about this, that, or the other, you were talking about how you don't want to directly at the boys and things
Yeah.
like that. Do you feel like if both parents are involved, they shutter more the kids, instead of two one-on-one talks?
I think it's got to be, it is savvy. You know, when it comes to parenting, just like anything working with teens today, it requires a great deal of savvy. And so I think you've got to always have a mixture. Unfortunately, I like either or scenarios. It's our all or nothing. If I could just always do it this way. That's my OCD, you know, right? But real life isn't like that. Real life is, okay, today, the wise thing to do, which is why I don't know how we parent very well without prayer. And where we ask, I will constantly rely on, Lord, give me the grace. Give me the grace. And give me the grace and the wisdom to know how to handle this situation. And so every kid is different. You know, we parent our two boys completely differently because they're two totally different. I think love languages, for those of you who have not read Love Languages for Children or Love Languages for Teens, please at least go to the website and read the blog post on the 5 love languages. It's so brilliant, it's manipulative. Like, my wife is a touch person. Love you, honey. But like, I abuse the hell out of this every time she's upset with me. I'm like, she comes up to me and gives me a massage when we first started dating. And it's like, why are you touching me? And she's like, because I love you. I was like, if you love me, sit there and tell me how wonderful I am. That is, buy me something, right? Have y'all all heard of the 5 love languages? Words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, acts of service, and touch. Dr. Gary Chapman. Telling you this will revolutionize your relationships with your children, your spouse, your partner, your friends. Right? My oldest, his love language, like his mother, is touch. My wife's upset with me, and she has literally begun to say this, started saying this to me 5 years ago. If you would just hold me and shut the hole under your nose, this would be over. Yes, ma'am. That's the way she is hardwired to connect. My youngest, Benjamin, is like me. So he's this tall, so I'll do this. Hey, buddy, you know, I'm really proud of you when you're able to, or, you know, I'll just give him words of affirmation. You know, look at him in the eye. Sometimes it requires a tag team approach, right? Sometimes it requires a one-on-one. And we do both. I think good parents, whatever that looks like, are always looking to have a toolbox of tricks. And the double team, the tag team, as well as, folks, please make use of the village. I'm sorry, there's just so much to say, you cannot say it all. But like, I tell parents all the time, who's your kid's favorite teacher? This is stealth parenting. This is like special ops parenting. Who's the teacher who they get along with? I don't care what grade they have in their class. Who's the teacher that they like the most? Call that teacher. Tell that teacher what's going on at home. Tell them to keep their mouths shut that they talk to you. And ask that teacher, or whoever that is in the school, to make contact with them and to check in with them. And to find very subtle ways. That is being intentional about. Or the school counselor. Who's someone you know? Who's the coach? I abused coaches when I was a campus minister because they were the ones who got to the kids the easiest, especially the ones who, I see soccer, you might even be a coach. I wouldn't hesitate to call the coaches to say, hey, this is what's going on. Would you use your, coaches are great relational ministers. Well, I don't want to do that. What if it gets back to the kid? Tell the other person, if you can trust them, to keep their mouth shut, but tell them what you're struggling with. And so the more avenues we get at those kids, the better. The team is better. One more? Yes, ma'am. Come again? Yeah, so Glow Kids is one. Take back your kids. Take back your kids. Is the next one. I have it up here. Let me find it. By Dr. Bill Doherty. Is a good one. And then I brought a few copies of my book, What Teens Want You to Know But Don't Tell You. And these are 10. They sell for 13, but I'll sell them for 10 tonight. Those are really good. It's just a great book. Very principled, very specific, very countercultural. I think reframes. It's been one of my favorite parenting books over the last few years, Dr. Bill Doherty. Just a couple other resources. Well, one other resource. I blog at bigballspeaker.com. friend me on Facebook. I do a lot of Facebook Live videos. I've done a lot of them, and a lot of them are cataloged that are just real practical. Definitely got a YouTube channel. The other thing is the the podcast. For those of you who do podcasts, Today's Teenager is my podcast and my nonprofit, and the funds that from book sales and from donations to Today's Teenager help us to produce resources for adults and also help teens who cannot afford mental health services such as like psychiatric evaluations and for those who don't have insurance. So that's what the mission of Today's Teenager does. But it's a great podcast. I interview experts in the field. There's about 37 of them right now. It's great stuff. It's basically all of my best talks in very concise format. So that's available. And I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes. Thank you so much. I also send out an email article, like a little email article every week. If that's something you'd want, just leave me your card or your email address and I can make sure you get on that list. And that's it. Thank you, folks. God bless you.